We were talking about diabetes, how many
Yeah,
people
and then of course Wayne come along very, very young and had diabetes, and traced it back, and everyone in Mom's family had diabetes, but Mom and I, you know, and it was kind of unusual. But Wayne had it so bad, and
he was in his 20s when he
early 20s when he got it.
He had it, or
And then he'd have to get those insulin shots all the time, and then finally we went up to Iowa, I forget what the name of the town. Anyway, Faye gave him her kidney, but that's where the kidney transplants were.
Right.
And he did really well for 12 years. And then and he had to go on dialysis, and that was kind of a nightmare. But in all the years that Wayne was sick, I never ever sat down with him that I heard him complain. I mean, you know, you got aches and pains, and you don't want to complain all the time because you know you don't want people don't want to hear about your aches and pains. But when you really have so much, you'd think he would say something. I've never ever heard him in his lifetime. But when he fell at Hannibal, they bought this most beautiful camper, huge. You had to go way, it was just high off the ground. I couldn't hardly get up there. And here's Wayne not able to see and trying to get up there. Faye had driven for years because he wasn't blind, but he was what they call legally blind. He couldn't see to drive. But it was so neat. But he fell one night at the end of the bed, and Faye got up and he said, just leave me lay here, I'll be all right in the morning. Well, they couldn't move that morning, and so they called an ambulance, and that was in September, and he was healing from his broken leg, but we don't know what happened. He went into a coma and he didn't die until 3 days before Christmas, but he was in this deep, deep coma on all this life-saving stuff, and he told her, he said, tired of fighting. And she repeated it. She said, tired of fighting? And he said, yeah. And she told him, she said, take everything off. We don't want to do this anymore. And so, you know, he lasted just a few days. But that was hard.
Yeah.
But it was easier to see him go. He had a tough life, but I told Wayne one time, I said, you know, if you totally lose your eyesight, you're one of the luckiest men in the world, because I don't know anybody that's got a sweeter wife. Faye took such good care of Wayne. I mean, you know, and after Wayne died, Faye cried for a year. I mean, one day before Christmas, she, and that had been a year later, she went into the closet and grabbed his clothes and started crying, and then she said she started screaming. And she cried for 3 days, and finally she called her nephew and said, Neil, I can't quit crying. And so they came over and sat with her and prayed with her and kind of got her calmed down. But she told her, told me, she said, Ileen, I want to come see you. I've got something I want to tell you. And I thought, oh, what could be so serious, you know? And her daughter prayed for her. She said, I just hope Mom can find something that can help her get through this. And she went on to Florida, but she called and said she had met someone, that they were really, really serious about each other. And I said, well, how'd you meet? And she said, I was afraid she was going to ask that. She said, I went to church, and I was crying so hard, I went and got in the car and left and went home. I thought, I just can't stand that. And she got online, and a whole bunch of names and pictures came up, but Randy's name came up, and she got in touch with him. His wife had been dead for 4 years, and when Faye brought him over for me to meet, I felt like I was looking at Wayne. I mean, he was so sweet, loved her so much. She had a new, beautiful sapphire and diamond ring. I said, oh, I love your ring. And she said, Randy gave me that, you know. And he just treats her like a jewel. He's just so sweet to her. And she is so happy. And I told her, when she said, I need to tell you, I met something, one and we're good. I said, oh my gosh, Faye, I'm so happy. And she said, I can't understand you taking it like this. And I said, Wayne's gone on to a much better place. Wayne would not want you. I mean, Wayne's happy now. The last thing in the world Wayne would want you to be doing is grieving. And, you know, he can't be happy if he thinks you're not. So, you know, young kids look at life as we've got all this life, but when you get over here, you look and you think, oh, you know, it's getting shorter and shorter. I need to take advantage of every day and make that day a happy day. And oh my gosh, she just beams and looks so cute, and he's so proud of her. We ran into him last week at this restaurant, and she was going to Fayette to a ball game to see the kids, but she said, I was hoping you all would come in so I could see you for a minute. Can't stay because we're going on to Fayette to see the kids' ball game. But she's very, very happy. And she said, I just can't believe you took it that way. And I said, Faye, you're my only sister. I want you to be happy. That's all in life I want, is to see you happy. And I looked at Randy and I said, I think you're doing a good job of it.
Well, I know he must have appreciated that too. That's
oh
hard to
yeah.
walk into a family.
Well, Arvel walked in to meet him, and he just was stunned. He said, I felt like I was looking at Wayne. He's just about Wayne's height and everything, and real jovial. And so, yeah, it's
well,
really
we talked
neat.
about kind of the older history of your parents and of you growing up. It might be nice to talk a little bit about your kids and us growing up and what things were like when you and Dad got married. You were both very young and didn't have
Had
much
no money. No, not much. No money.
And so what did you guys do for money? Or what
Well,
did you do
Arvel
first
was
got
working
married?
at Jackson's as parts man when we got married.
Jackson
and,
Motors.
Yeah, and I think he was getting $30 a week. And I was expecting a baby. And Arvel went in and said, I need a raise. We're going to have a baby and I need more money. So they raised it to $40 a week. And Myron says, well, you know, we might have to drop it back down again. But Myron was so stuck up. And Arvel had to talk to everybody. And Arvel would come home so depressed because he'd say, there are days when they never speak to me. And I just can't stand it anymore. And so he tried out as fireman on the railroad and got the job, and we moved to Clifton Hill to just the cemetery house. It was just, and paid $15 a month rent. And it was at the corner of the cemetery. Well, there was no bathroom or anything in it, and the outhouse was closer to the tombstones than the house. And when John and Louise come, of course they had Robbie.
And these are family friends.
Right, our best friends, yeah. Well, John was so afraid of the cemetery that he wouldn't take Robbie out to the toilet. They'd stand on the back step, you know. And then we told him this tale about this woman. She used to be really, really smart, but I guess she kind of lost, after her parents died, she kind of lost her mind and never came out of the house. But at night, she would go lay on her parents' grave. Well, of course, we were in the cemetery house, and we'd tell about her, and we'd say that she would look in our window and watch our TV. Oh, that scared John to death. Do you think she's looking in now? And we said, I don't know. But one time, when Orville and all the boys were young, they would go to the cemetery and hide behind the tombstones and try to hear what she was saying to her parents, you know. But she lived a long time, and we were just used to her.
She was
and
the
then,
Clifton Hill character.
kind of a character, but nobody knew her. And I guess at one time she was a teacher and very, very smart, but she just kind of lost her mind and never got out. So she was kind of the vampire of the town or something, I guess. But anyway.
And of course, when Clifton Hill didn't used to be what it is now, there actually was like a grocery store and retail and like a little hotel. Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. Mrs. Byram, I'll tell you a story about Orville and I dating. One night he was trying to take me home, and there was two ways to get home, but he couldn't get up one hill. And so he went down and he tried the other one, and he couldn't.
Was it icy or something?
It was solid ice. We'd had a bad storm. So I said, take me into Mrs. Byram's, because she was our neighbor, and she'd moved to town and was had this hotel, and all the men would go in, kind of the coffee shop and all. But when she'd make pies, the guys could sit there, and she'd make the pie, and then she'd lick the knife, you know. And one of our neighbors said, I saw her lick that knife, and I just wasn't interested in pie anymore. But anyway, Orville took me back to town to stay all night with Miss Byram, and she said, oh, honey, come on in. I've got a bed just ready for you and everything. And Orville went home. And I looked at the telephone lines was all down because it was a really bad storm. And I said, Mrs. Byram, I can't stay here tonight. There is no way. My mother will walk the floor till I get home. And so I had every intention.
And you couldn't have called her?
Oh no, the lines were down. And so I walked home. I had a little brown teddy bear coat and I had black baby doll shoes on. And I just sung at the top of my lungs all the way home and walked home. But the funniest thing was, why? I was halfway home when Orville couldn't get up the hill. Why didn't I let Orville? That just shows my independent pride. I wasn't about to have him walk me home. And so I went clear back to town and walked all the way home. And then Mom threw a fit. Why did you? I said, I knew you wouldn't go to bed till I got home, you know. But the funniest thing was the next morning when I got off the school bus. Orville was there in the study hall and saw me get off that bus, and he said, what are you doing on the bus? I said, I walked home last night. He said, you did not. I said, yeah, I did. I knew Mom wasn't going to bed until I got home, so I walked home.
So you and Dad were sweethearts all through high school.
Oh, yeah. Well, the first time Orville saw...
Was he 2 years ahead of you or one?
One. First time he saw me, he said, oh, look what the dog's drug in. I reminded him of that the other day. I said, you weren't very impressed the first time you saw me. But Mrs. Byram's granddaughter was Betty Sue Byram, and she was dating Orville. And Mom and Dad would not let me date, but I could double date. So I went with Bobby Ellen Mayo, would sit in the back seat with Bobby Ellen, and Orville and Betty Sue would be making out in the front seat. And I was madly in love with Orville. I just thought he was the cutest thing I ever saw. Well, I couldn't stand that. Well, one night Betty Sue and I was staying all night, and she said, don't tell Orville, but I had a date with another boy last night. And that was like saying sick 'em to a dog. Because I let Orville know that I was very, very fond of him, and we started going together, and we was the most lovesick things all through high school. We was sickening to everybody else that saw us because we only had eyes for each other.